Jake Paul just demanded a jaw-dropping $120 million to step in the ring with Canelo Alvarez, and the entire boxing world is in chaos. Promoters are in absolute panic because this insane demand could shake the sport to its very core.
No chance of beating. Everybody loved him.
Yeah.
But once he got beat, the novelty kind of wore off.
Yeah.
And I think that's what would happen with Jake. If he were
It
to
happened. He got beat, and the novelty did wear off. That's why he has to get a guy like Tyson and
try to get some
like
credibility back.
When he fought somebody that was actually his age and was actually a boxer and was actually his size, he lost. I mean, it is what it is. I'm not trying to shit on the kid.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't care what he's doing. But, I mean, come on, man, to be fighting Mike Tyson.
Jake Paul is demanding $120 million to fight Canelo Alvarez. And the number is not the problem. The problem is that the math actually works, and every traditional promoter in boxing knows it. The panic you are seeing right now is not about a YouTuber asking for too much money. It is about what happens to this sport when he gets it. By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly why that number landed the way it did, and why the people most upset about it have the least power to stop it.
50-something-year-olds.
You don't think Tyson has a chance?
And making a living at it. I think that Mike Tyson has a puncher's chance against anybody. Mike's 58 years old. You know what I mean?
Right.
I hate doing this because Mike gets mad at me every time I do this, but Mike shouldn't be fighting.
I mean, because you look at Jake Paul, he fought Tyron Woodley, slept him, Anderson Silva, I think he fought Nate. Is there, I mean, if he wants to do boxing, why not fight guys that actually box for a living?
100%. Fight guys that box.
If you're watching this video, you already know Jake Paul and Canelo Alvarez have been circling each other for years. Most people watching right now think this is the same story on a loop. Paul calls out Canelo, Canelo says no, Paul says he got ducked, boxing moves on, same cycle, new headline. Here's what this channel has been tracking, and what almost no one else has put together yet. Paul just fought Anthony Joshua. He lost. He had his jaw broken in 4 places. He needed 2 surgeries, 4 titanium plates, and had teeth removed. He earned a reported $92 million for that fight. He got up from the canvas in Miami, posted his X-ray on Instagram with a broken jaw, and immediately typed, "Give me Canelo in 10 days." That is not a man who learned a lesson. That is a man who learned a price. We're breaking this down in 3 parts. First, where the $120 million demand comes from and why it is not an insane number. Second, what Paul's co-promoter confirmed is happening right now in private and why the timeline for this fight is closer than anyone admits. And third, the twist that explains why the people panicking are the ones who should be panicking most and why it has nothing to do with Jake Paul's boxing record.
And, you know.
Another guy you've had some verbal spats with that's been very publicized is Oscar De La Hoya. And I think it goes back to, I think he said you blocked a fight with he and George St. Pierre. Is that where it started from? Or
talk about Jake Paul. Like, me and Jake Paul have had whatever.
Right.
You know, Jake Paul's a kid that's out doing his thing. He's trying to make some money,
Right.
whatever his deal is. Oscar De La Hoya.
Okay.
To understand why $120 million makes sense as an opening demand, you have to understand what the Joshua fight established. On December 19, 2025, Jake Paul stepped into the Kaseya Center in Miami against Anthony Joshua. The physical mismatch was undeniable. Joshua was 27 pounds heavier, 5 inches taller, a former 2-time unified heavyweight champion. Paul was stopped in the 6th round. He went down multiple times. He left with a jaw broken in 4 places. The reported total purse for that fight, $184 million. Paul's share, approximately $92 million. Some accounts put the total even higher. Paul himself claimed $267 million on social media. Whatever the exact figure, the floor was clear. Paul had earned roughly $92 million in a fight he lost badly. That number is now the baseline. It is not a ceiling, it is a floor. Paul is 29 years old. He is targeting a return at cruiserweight, a weight class where he holds a natural size advantage over Canelo, who has never competed above 175 pounds. He had a second jaw surgery in February 2026. His co-promoter confirmed he can resume sparring in June with a return window of late 2026 or early 2027. Canelo fights September 12 in Riyadh and then needs recovery time before his next camp. The calendars align for early 2027, and this is where the story gets complicated.
Now, most people covering the story stopped at the number. $120 million is too much for Jake Paul. Paul doesn't deserve that. End of discussion. But there's one piece they all left out, and it changes the entire negotiation logic. Paul's Joshua fight earned $92 million in defeat. Crawford earned $50 million beating Canelo in the biggest actual boxing match of 2025. The Crawford-Canelo fight on Netflix drew 41.5 million viewers. Paul's Tyson fight drew 108 million peak viewers. Paul's Joshua fight drew 33 million. Even in a loss, Paul delivered a bigger Netflix number than the sport's marquee pound-for-pound fight between two elite world champions. That is the data point that matters. Paul is not pricing himself based on his boxing record. He is pricing himself based on his audience. And his audience, demonstrated across 3 straight Netflix events, is one of the largest sports audiences on the planet, regardless of outcome. Industry analysts writing about the Paul-Canelo fight have projected both men at a minimum of $100 million each. The high-end estimates go to $150 million to $200 million per fighter. Paul's $120 million demand sits at the low end of the realistic range, not at the ceiling. That is the number no traditional promoter can argue with, because the traditional promoter's leverage has always been controlling who gets access to the big platforms and the big money. Paul's platform is already bigger than the platform. He doesn't need a promoter to sell a Canelo fight. He needs a contract, a date, and a streaming deal, all of which he has handled himself before. But that's not even the most important part of this story. And this is where the real story, the one that has boxing's business infrastructure in genuine panic, finally snaps into focus. Because this negotiation is not dead. It is active, and the people running it are not the promoters. Paul's co-promoter Nakisa Badarian confirmed to The Sun in February 2026, just weeks after the Joshua loss and while Paul was still in surgical recovery, that Paul keeps messaging me about wanting to fight Canelo. Badarian's response was not a hard no, it was, let's just meet and discuss what the right path is. That is a negotiation in progress, hidden inside a recovery update, buried beneath the jaw surgery headlines. Paul's history with Canelo's team goes deeper than most people realize. Before the February 2025 deal collapsed, Canelo's management, his trainer Eddie Reynoso and Premier Boxing Champions, signed a confidentiality agreement with MVP Team. The two sides were close enough that posters were being designed, and an announcement was 2 days away. ESPN's Mike Coppinger confirmed the deal was being finalized. Eddie Hearn told Boxing News the fight was done. What killed it was not lack of interest. It was a $300 million threat from Turki Al-Sheikh to pull Canelo's entire Riyadh season contract if he fought Paul first. That contract now has 2 fights remaining, September 12, 2026 in Riyadh, and potentially one more. After that, Canelo is a free agent with no Crawford rematch available because Crawford has retired. A free agent whose last traditional opponent, Christian Mabili, Hamza Shiraz, Diego Pacheco, draws a fraction of the audience Paul delivers. A free agent who told his own daughter when she came home excited about a possible Paul fight that it was the first time she had ever asked him about a fight. Canelo's own daughter was excited about Paul. That detail came out during the negotiations. It never left the room until now. But here's what nobody is connecting right now, and once you see it, you can't unsee it.
Here is the twist that reframes the entire panic. The promoters in absolute panic right now are not panicking because $120 million is too much for Jake Paul to demand. They are panicking because they have no role in the conversation. Think about how this fight gets made if it gets made. Paul has MVP and Netflix. Canelo has Canelo Promotions, his own banner launched for September 12, 2026. Both men have demonstrated the ability to negotiate directly with streaming platforms. Both men have demonstrated the ability to set their own financial terms without going through a traditional promotional house. When Paul says $120 million, he is not asking Matchroom or PBC or Golden Boy for permission to make that demand. He is saying it directly into a microphone and letting the market respond. And the market, based on Paul's consistent Netflix numbers, responds at that level. The traditional boxing promoter's business model has three components: access to fighters, access to platforms, and access to money. Paul has his own platform, his own money relationship with Netflix, and his own negotiating team. Canelo now has his own promotional banner and his own money relationship with Riyadh Season. The traditional promoter has been systematically removed from both sides of this equation. That is the panic, not the number, the absence of a seat at the table. Paul will be cleared to spar in June. Canelo fights September 12th. By the time both men finish their 2026 commitments and enter 2027, Paul will be 30, Canelo will be 36, and the fight everyone says cannot happen will be the most commercially logical fight in the sport. One streaming platform, two men, zero middlemen, and a number that makes both of them more money than any traditional promoter could ever have arranged. Here's where we land. Jake Paul made $92 million losing to Anthony Joshua. He had his jaw broken in 4 places. He posted the x-ray and called out Canelo. He had a second surgery, committed to cruiserweight, and started messaging his co-promoter before the stitches were out. The $120 million demand is not a bluff. It is a business position, built on 3 years of audience data, 2 Netflix blockbusters, a signed contract that Canelo once put his name to, and a 2027 window where both men are available, motivated, and in need of the biggest fight they can still make. The promoters panicking right now have already lost the argument. The question is whether Canelo says yes. Here's what boxing has to answer right now. Does Canelo Alvarez take the $120 million and give Paul the fight that Riyadh Season once paid $300 million to prevent? Or does he keep playing it safe and watch the biggest payday of his final chapter disappear into early retirement? Drop your take below. If you want the full story on everything happening in boxing before it hits mainstream, hit subscribe.